Rapid pace out here early in the second. LeVert, hey, knocks it down. Rondo's on the run. Stops. Hits Love. Love fires. Cavs reset with a fresh 14. Under 3 to go in the half. Garland works on Holiday. Toss it for a moment. Shovels to Mobley. Garland, step back three, drew a foul, knocks it down.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to episode number 32 of the All Things Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Brandon Lewis, Joey Schneider, as always.
Hey, what's going on, Brandon? You know what? Always happy to be here. Love doing the show, but unfortunately, today we lost the legend. Ray Liotta passed away. We are recording on Thursday. Shoeless Joe from Field of Dreams, and one of my favorite movies of all time, Goodfellas, obviously. So sad day for me personally, as me being a big movie guy. But yeah, the show goes on, and rest in peace. So got a few things to talk about today, Brandon, with the Cleveland Cavaliers. While the NBA playoffs are still going on, the Cavs are back already practicing, getting ready for next year. And I'm here for it. You know what? I go on social media a lot, more than I probably care to admit. And people are already just saying, get me to the next Cavs season. Like, we're ready. We haven't even hit the draft yet. 14th pick overall. Haven't even hit it. People are like, let's get us into the next season. There has been one noticeable absence from the practices, and that is one Mr. Collin Sexton, who we know is looking for that new contract. What do you think is going on there?
So, and we've talked about this a little bit more off air than on air, obviously, but the reports have been really ramping up over the last week or so of the Cavs wanting to get Collin Sexton's contract done before he even hits free agency. They don't want him to even test the market. Now, as a reminder, he is a restricted free agent, and so that means that the Cavs can match whatever offer somebody else throws at Sexton. But obviously, if it's a high number the Cavs don't want to pay, they may or may not match that offer. We'll see on that. I think that's one of the reasons why they want to try and get Sexton's deal done right now. And, we talked about it a little bit at the trade deadline when there was rumors out there about Sexton potentially being traded. And we both said, leading up to the deadline, there were all those rumors about the Cavs were interested in Sexton. And then they just immediately stopped. And we talked about, it's because we see Sexton on the bench. We hear how much of a leader he's been, even though he hasn't been playing. And I think that is a factor because I think the Cavs really feel like that they know Collin Sexton. I think that they are still very high on him, much to your of being high on him, of being that potential guy that we have been talking about that the Cavs need. We threw out trade scenarios for a couple of weeks, but as we have also talked about, I think the Cavs do view Collin Sexton as that guy. And I think Sexton wants to be here. I think the interesting thing is going to be, I don't know if it's necessarily about the money. I think it's the length of the contract. Does he want a 4-year deal with a lot of money, or is it going to be a 1-year deal because he is coming off in ACL injury, or is it going to be somewhere in the middle where maybe it's a 2-year deal with a player option for that second season? That, I think, is where kind of the push and pull is going to be because, who knows? Maybe Sexton wants a 1-year deal, so maybe he can test the market next year. But part of me is thinking he likes the city of Cleveland, and he's probably going to want financial security in case he gets hurt again, because I think that this is a factor, and I'm always scared of, obviously, knee and ACL and all those injuries, because once you have it, it's very likely you could have it again. And so, me personally, we'll see. I don't know what the contract's going to look like, but at this point, I believe Collin Sexton will be back in the Cavs uniform at the start of next season.
I do as well. And as far as the contract goes, I think that the sweet spot for me is 3 years. Okay. Because at the end of those 3 years, we got to pay Evan Mobley. and we got to see where he's going to be. So I think that is the sweet spot for me. Garland's going to get his bag. Come what I think next season. So I think that 3 years is the sweet spot as far as I'm concerned. You're going to have money coming off after this season with Kevin Love and Karis LeVert. Whether we re-sign Kevin Love for less, which I really hope Kevin Love stays and we're able to re-sign him for less money. Someone might throw more out there, but I mean, at the end of next season, I think he's going to be 33,
I believe
33,
so, yeah.
34, something like that. So, and here's something that I, for some reason, didn't even think of. And I don't know if you've thought of this either. A position that we have needed for a long time has been a backup point guard, right? Well, if we have Collin Sexton and Darius Garland needs a night off, we have a backup point guard.
Yeah, again, Sexton can play both the 1 and 2. And again, this goes back to, I think the Cavs, and again, it all depends on if Sexton is staying, which I think now we both believe that he's probably going to stay. It's under the Cavs and then both have some mutual interest. But if he stays, they have legit decisions to make, not only about the number 14 pick, but there's a lot of similar guys on the roster. You mentioned, Sexton can play a backup point guard. Well, they're also, as we have known, they're looking to bring back Ricky Rubio. If he comes back, maybe they're looking to play Rubio and Sexton together, or maybe they're looking, it depends on the money for Sexton. Maybe Sexton slides into the starting lineup. Maybe he's the 2 in the starting lineup. There's so many different scenarios here.
I think Sexton is the 2 in the starting lineup. I mean, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I think that Garland would be 1, Sexton would be 2. I don't know. Maybe LeVert would be 3, and marketing comes off the bench, or maybe LeVert comes off the bench with a Okoro. There's so many options, and same with Rubio. I mean, and that's what we talked about early in the season, is that even though they have, they'll have their starting lineup, the rotational pieces, it just felt like you could play anyone with anyone. You could have, Rubio and Sexton out on the floor. You could have Garland and Sexton. You could have Garland and Rubio. You could have, any combination of Markkanen, Mobley, Allen, Love, LeVert, Okoro, those. I mean, we're just throwing names out there at this point. They haven't signed Rubio yet. We haven't even re-signed Sexton. But at that point, then you start questioning: do you keep the 14th pick? Do you try and grab someone that's I don't know. I mean, what do you think we should do with the 14th pick?
Okay. I'm going to answer this 2 ways. Number 1, I have the poll results from last week. You guys can obviously go follow us on Twitter at All Things Cavs. The majority of the people that voted, and we had 84 votes on that poll, 50% said trade the pick. They said trade it for a star player, as we talked about, obviously, for Bradley Beal being one of those names.
Right. But you put, I said trade the pick. You put trade for a star player. You are not getting a star player for the 14th pick. You would have to package someone else with them. And I don't know who those person would be.
Well, okay. So 50% said that. Now keep the pick was 33%. Trading up in the draft, as we talked about last week, was 11%, and then trading back, as we've also talked about, which is also a possibility, is at 6%. When I've heard that these rumors, and obviously reports been coming out about Sexton, my thought was okay, I think the Cavs internally feel like they don't have to make a lot of moves. I think that the front office feels like the team that we saw last season in January, February, before everybody got hurt, is a team that's on the rise and the core, and they don't feel like that they need to go out and trade for one of these star players or make a big time splash this offseason. So it leads me to this. I believe what they want to do is they want to keep Sexton and make the pick at 14. But I was thinking about this. if it's a wing player at 14, and we have obviously talked about a bunch of scenarios about a bunch of different players who could fall to the Cavs. Well, if that's the case, if you think about coming off the bench, if Sexton starts, I still think that they love the three big lineup of Marketing, Mobley, and Allen. I think that would be your starting five, which would bring LeVert off the bench. But then you have a conundrum, which would be you would have LeVert, Osman, and then another wing player. Like, I would think that one of the two between LeVert and Osman would have to go because one of them's not going to get any playing time unless you don't bring back Rubio or something, and LeVert could be your backup point guard.
And you're forgetting Okoro there, and that's
Okoro too, right? So you would have a wing, Okoro, LeVert, and Osman. Out of those four players, someone's not going to get any playing time, right? You would think. So either they draft a backup point guard, or if they do draft a shooting guard or small forward, Osman or LeVert would probably have to be traded. Am I overthinking this?
I mean, potentially, I think that we have the money right now, and we'll definitely have the money at the end of by the end of the season. But I think that 14th pick, and as we said last week, and myself and Joel Ewell put out a mock draft. You guys haven't checked it out, go to believeitmediallc.com, check out and this was our pre-lottery mock draft. We'll be putting out a new one here very shortly. But there are so many good players in this draft. So many. There's like I said, like there's 20 players who I could see becoming fringe all-stars to actual all-stars. Like it's mind-blowing how deep this draft is. So the Cavs at 14 are in a good spot. And there is a scenario out there where I think they probably could trade 14 and maybe Osman, Okoro, or maybe Markkanen, it depends, to get an upgrade. I mean, I don't know who that would be. We tried brainstorming a little bit, and it just doesn't seem like there's really anyone available. But I would be okay keeping that pick because there's just a lot of talent, and someone's gonna fall. And even if someone doesn't fall at in that range, there's still players who I think could who could develop into all-stars. But beyond that, I just think Sexton is underrated. We talked about trading him last year. We talked about his value at certain times. We questioned things, but that's what we're supposed to do, especially as the season went on. You could see the value that he brought to the Cavs, and they were missing that scoring. There was a lot of games where they could have used Collin Sexton scoring, and then when Garland got hurt, if Sexton was healthy, he could have been that backup point. He would, maybe if he was started at 2, he would have moved over to 1, and you could have had LeVert at 2 and Okoro at 3, and that kind of would have solved some issues there. So on top of that, I think that he's underrated. I don't, I'm going to get roasted for this one, but in my personal opinion, I don't think that Collin Sexton is honestly that far behind someone like Donovan Mitchell. I think that Mitchell has had more opportunity in Utah because, Mike Conley's getting up there, but he's still a very serviceable point guard. And Mitchell has been their main option, just like Sexton was when he averaged 25 a game when the Cavs were a bad team. Now, the Jazz were a good team, but he's still their main option to go to. But they're very similar type players.
And as someone who has been called a Collin Sexton hater, I'm actually going to defend you on this take, and I actually agree with you. I'm going to defend Sexton for the first time on this podcast because you mentioned it. Mitchell's team, Mitchell has always been, Utah has always been a very good team, right? They've never been. Obviously they made the finals in the 90s with Stockton and Malone, but really for the past 10, 15 years, they've always been just a really good, solid team that makes the playoffs every single year. They maybe have had 1 or 2 bad years, but they're usually in that playoff talk. The Cavs were stripped to the bare bones in 2018 and 2019. Yes, it was the same team, but let's face it, LeBron carried that team to the NBA Finals. We all know it. And so Sexton basically had to come in there, and for pretty much 2 years, because obviously the year after they got Darius Garland, but Garland was still a rookie, and nobody really knew how good Garland was going to be. You know, a lot of people thought Garland had kind of boom or bust potential. And obviously he's showing his potential now, and it takes him a couple years. And, you know, it's interesting because I always preach for years, like, you got to be aggressive. You can't be patient. You got to go out and get stars. And we have seen, like, over the last 2 years, 3 years, and we have talked about now multiple times every single week, it feels like the league has changed and you could afford to be patient. I mean, look at a team like Boston or Golden State or Miami. These guys that are in the conference finals right now, they have had core players, maybe not star, maybe guys are coming off the bench, but in Boston's case, obviously Tatum, Brown, like they drafted these guys. You look at Golden State, like Curry and Klay Thompson were not these world beaters. You know, they would make the playoffs, but they got beat, you know, probably 3 or 4 years before they became who they are and reached their starter level status. And I think that's what the Cavs are going to do. I just think that they believe in that they have a young core. You know, the oldest player on this team right now is Kevin Love, and he is 32 years old. And they have such a young core. They're just going to ride it out. And the hope is, again, they're just going to get better each and every year. And I think that's it. I'm excited that these guys are back in the building, obviously working. And I actually think not making the playoffs this year, I know we all wanted to make the playoffs. We kind of felt it. But it could be a blessing in disguise. We kind of addressed it a little bit when they didn't make the playoffs, but the fact that they're not playing right now, the fact that, and I don't want to say wasted, but let's face it, Miami would have probably beat them. And, 4 or 5 games, they would have been, and again, I don't want to say wasted because playoff experience is always valuable, but the fact that they got this time now, that they are just focused and hungry. And I know some of those players like Garland and Mobley especially feel like they got snubbed of awards, and Jared Allen even, you could throw in there too. These guys are going to hopefully come out in October with their hair on fire. And the fact that the city of Cleveland, you mentioned it, is talking about Cavs basketball right now, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to throw this out there. Do you remember when they drafted Darius Garland? And everyone said that they wanted Sexton and Garland to be Cleveland's version of Dame and CJ.
You know what? I remember this is the first time I ever talked to you. When we were about to begin this podcast, that was probably the first conversation we had was that.
And now I see it. I see it now. I see Garland being that superstar point guard, and I see Collin Sexton being that all-star shooting guard. I mean, everyone wants their players to be taller, whatever, but it worked in Portland with Dame and CJ, and I see it now. I see exactly what they were going for, and I didn't think it would work. But I think Sexton is that good. I have that much. I think he's grown that much of a player. Even with being out this year, I think it's made him grow even more because he's gotten hungrier. He's had to speak up more as a leader without playing in these games. And I think that if the deal is right for both sides, I think you absolutely need to take it. I think if you can get Rubio back, you absolutely get Rubio back. And you know what? And then you have options there with the 14th pick. You could trade it, with a couple, maybe a couple of players to try and bring someone else in that maybe you think, could help the team compete. Or you just take that player at 14 that you think is going to be, the best available and the one that's going to help your team, and you have another young piece. So there's so many things that the Cavs can do right now. They're in a very, very, very good position. And I mean, I think that adding Sexton back into that lineup with another year's experience, I think that they're going to be just a ridiculously good team next year.
I hope. Now, the one thing I will push back on you on is I don't think CJ and Dame work in Portland. What I call work because they only made one conference finals. You gotta, and I have said this obviously, you gotta make a finals. Like they did not have barely any postseason success. They were a good regular season team always, and then they would get beat mostly in the first or second round. That is not what I call working.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Did they have a Jared Allen or Evan Mobley?
And that was my next point. Yeah. That the Cavs, though, have a better supporting cast.
It's not even a supporting cast. I mean, you got Evan Mobley has the ability to become a generational talent. Right. You got Jared Allen, who's an all-star. You know, in my opinion, Collin Sexton is a fringe, if not an all-star player. You got Darius Garland, who blossomed into a star this year. And then at 3, yeah, we could use a wing, but Markkanen, when he's on, he is on. You can put, if you want to put LeVert in there, there's all sorts of different things you can do. But
the key to this, I think, is going to be with all of these players, and we talked about the versatility. Everybody is obviously going to have to sacrifice, but there are not enough minutes for everybody, right? And so I think somebody like LeVert or Osman, if he's still on the team, or Mark, if Margaret goes to the bench, is he going to be, I don't want to say willing, because I feel like he will, but is he going to be the same Lauri Markkanen that we saw in the starting lineup? Because we haven't really seen him come off the bench. He worked so well in that 3, 7 foot tall lineup. Is he going to be as effective coming off the bench? I think that this is where, and I know that we are jumping way ahead, but I usually don't think stuff like preseason matters, but for a team like the Cavs that has a lot of stuff to figure out, and obviously we'll know what the roster looks like, they better. We talked about this last year. They never figured out really their set rotation last year. And part of it was because of injuries. This year, I think the biggest thing is hey, Garland, you play this many minutes. Sexton, you play this many minutes. And when Garland comes out, you move to the one for a little bit, or Karras comes in, he plays the point, whatever it is. Separate and clear defining roles for this team, because when you don't have that, that's what's going to cause trouble for this team if you can't get guys knowing what their role is going to be.
I agree with you, but I also think that, as games progress, certain lineups work better against certain teams, and you can go on, you could have your starting 5, but for some reason 5 guys off the bench, cut the deficit from 15 down to 2. So you roll with who's high. And I think that having that option is nice, but it's not something you want to do on a consistent basis. You kind of want to have your set roles, like you said, but having the option to say, okay, well, this guy's obviously off a little bit tonight. Let's get, let's get someone else to step up into his role. Whether, let's say they start Markkanen's having an off night. Well, let's put in Okoro, see if maybe defense is the issue. Or not, that's not okay. Let's put in LeVert, see if maybe offensively, we're gonna get going. So having those options, but it's nice. But like you said, they do need to still have defined roles. You can move LeVert between shooting guard, small forward, Sexton, point guard and shooting guard. Darius is pretty much just a point guard. You could probably move him over to the 2 if you really needed to, but I think that you pretty much just keep him at point guard. But but there's a lot of options. There's a lot of things that are going on. I'm glad to see everyone's back though, practicing. This just shows NBA season isn't even over. It's not over. We still, finals hasn't even started. We still don't even know who's in the finals, and yet the Cavs are back practicing because that's where they want to get next year. That's encouraging, and the fact that the fans want the Cavs to be back already is very, very, very encouraging. That place the Rock is going to be absolutely electrifying on opening night.
Important factor as well before we get into our playoff talk, and I'm not so sure, but it just feels like it. The NBA has the shortest offseason. As soon as the finals ends, it's draft, it's free agency, it's maybe summer league, and then maybe a month off, and then you're right in a training camp. So the fact that these guys are getting work now, and again, they are in the building, they're bonding, they are working, and it is really fun, and it gets fans. The most exciting thing in sports to me, besides if your team is a Super Bowl contender, or Super Bowl NBA Finals, whatever, the second most exciting thing to me is a team that didn't make the playoffs, but was really hungry and on the rise. And it's exactly where the Cavs are at right now. We'll see what kind of leap they make going into next season. Let's talk some NBA playoffs, though, because as of today's recording, Golden State is up 3-1 on the Dallas Mavericks. The Boston Celtics took Game 5 last night from the Miami Heat. They are now up 3-2. We have had, what would that be? 9 or 10 conference finals games, and not one of them has really been close at the end of the game.
Nope.
I had said last week, I went on a limb and said I thought Golden State was going to win this year's championship. Steph Curry was going to win Finals MVP. I do feel like tonight Golden State wraps it up against Dallas. I think that they will advance. Dallas had a nice season. I obviously did not think they had enough personnel. And I thought that Golden State with Draymond Green and all their guys, Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney, they could throw a lot of bodies at Luka Doncic, make it up for him. And that's exactly what happened. But your thoughts overall on what we've seen from the conference finals.
Oh yeah. I mean, every game has been a blowout. I mean, I like the teams in it. I just think that, it hasn't been entertaining. You can pretty much turn it off by the third quarter and know who wins the game. I agree with you. Golden State takes it. But that Doncic, I mean, man, what can you say about the guy? He's basically trying to LeBron his team into the finals.
I made this comparison. I said the Dallas team to me feels like the 07 Cavs.
But
not on that poor level, but I'm not saying it's like that far off. I mean, they have a couple of other good players, but Luka is like the guy on that team.
Name some. Okay, they got Jalen Brunson. Name me someone on that Cavs team who was even close to Jalen Brunson.
I mean, Z was a pretty good player.
I'll give you Z, but I mean Z was getting up there at that time, wasn't he?
I don't know. I could double check that if we really wanted to dig into stats. But
I'm not. We don't got to dig into stats. I'm just saying. I mean, they got some players that can help, and that Cavs team was historically atrocious, except for one LeBron James. But the series I'm a little more interested in is Boston Heat 3-2 is in favor of Boston. I'm going to be honest. I thought the Heat have gotten hit by the injury bug at the worst time possible, and I know that Boston hasn't by any chance or by any stretch of the imagination been that healthy either. They've had a lot of guys that have been injured too, but man, that is just a back and forth beating between the teams. Tonight, I believe not tonight. The next game is
they play Friday, and then Game
Boston.
7 would be Sunday. Yeah, they would play Friday in Boston. I think we haven't really touched on this a lot, but usually the NBA gives teams more days off, I feel like, for the playoffs, and this year it's been every other day. Again, I don't know if that's contributing to the poor shooting. It feels like, one game, one team is shooting really hot and the other team can't shoot at all, and it's just leading to, easy buckets, and it's just been, these games have not really even been competitive. But if you missed last week's podcast, folks, this man on my left on my Zoom box here, Joey Schneider, threatened to punch me in the face if the Miami Heat made the NBA Finals. I don't know how that would work because Joey's probably about 150 pounds and maybe even a foot taller than me. I am a 5'2", 140 soaking wet. But with that being said, I think Miami obviously had a great season. They were the number one seed. I have doubted them all season long. I have called them the 2015 Atlanta Hawks, who of course were the number one seed and then got swept off the floor by the Cavs. I thought all along that Boston is the better team. And you mentioned obviously Jimmy Butler dealing with an injury. Tyler Hero out for Miami obviously hurts them a lot. But we talked about Miami being physical and just being a really good team, and that's true. But Boston was really challenged, I think, by Milwaukee. Not saying that Miami wasn't challenged by Atlanta or Philly, but that Boston-Milwaukee series was very physical. And I think that Boston is just they are tough. Those guys, Jalen Tatum, Jason Brown, they may have bad games, but nothing phases them. And they don't really play particularly well, and they win the game. And I think that just showed, I think last night showed that Boston was the better team. I would worry if I was Boston, they don't close it down in 6, and I think Miami would be a really hard place to win in a game 7. I am going to say I think Boston wins tomorrow night. That would be game 6, and we get a Boston Golden State Finals, 2 evils of Cleveland.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you again. I'm gonna say I think Boston closes it out in 6. Butler and Hero. I mean, you're talking about your best player and your best bench player, and maybe your second best player on the team, and Hero, being out. So I mean, Jimmy Butler is he tough, and he's doing his best. Tyler Hero, 6th man of the year. Some might say the second best player on the Heat. Just not being able to play, it's a killer. And even if they do play, they're not playing at 100%. And man, the Boston Celtics. I mean, not only are they good, but some of the trades they made, like Derek White, he steps up in situations. Marcus Smart got hurt, came back like nothing happened. Tatum and Brown, obviously, just they figured it out. At the beginning of the season, people are like, let's break them up. You've been talking about that, and now it's why the hell would you do that?
It goes back to patience. It really does. It goes again. And I wrote about this. I think probably last month or the month before that. How in sports it was always aggressive wins, especially in the NBA. Teams would give up on these young kids all the time to get these stars. And now, as we've talked about, the league is just filled with really good quality basketball players.
And let me give you two examples real quick. Al Horford has been playing his like he's completely out of his mind, but Robert Williams, young player, been played great all season. I think he was hurt. He was hurt a little bit of the season. And then Grant Williams. Yeah. Is he a rookie this year? Or last year? I'm not 100% sure.
I thought it was last year, but
it might have been last year. But being able to bring him along and then seeing him step up, as the season progressed, as people went down, and big time minutes in games.
So Grant was actually drafted in 2019.
Okay. So it's like what? So it's 2 years ago.
3 years, yeah.
3 years. But you're allowing players to develop. And then, they got Derek White for basically nothing from the Spurs. So, I mean, good moves, good core, and just like you said, a tough team. And these guys, they've been in the playoffs. They've been battle tested. They're ready. They're getting a little bit of help with Miami being hurt. So, that is a thing, but I think that Celtics Warriors is a very interesting matchup if it happens.
Hey, listen, before we go for today, obviously there's a lot of hate on the Cleveland side. Cleveland fans don't like Boston. Cleveland fans obviously don't like Golden State for what they put us through for 4 years, obviously winning 3 titles. But for both of those teams, and really, I do want to touch on Golden State for a second, because even though they had Kevin Durant for 3 finals out of the 6 that they are about to make, I don't know if people realize this, but the last 6 times Golden State has made the postseason, if they win tonight, they're about to be in the NBA Finals. They took 2 years off. Last year, they obviously made the play-in tournament. They lost to Memphis. They could have been the 8th seed, but Memphis ended up taking it from them. But, that is really hard to do. especially when you have your core like Steph Curry, who was injured for a year, Klay Thompson, who was coming back slowly. He has good games, he has his off days, but he was hurt for 2 straight years. Draymond Green for a couple of years looked like he was falling off a cliff. Now he's back to doing Draymond things, and they got young players like Jordan Poole. Not only that, but Kevon Looney and Andrew Wiggins, who at one time, as we all know, was the #1 pick at the Cleveland Cavaliers and never played a game for us. But he was
Otto Porter Jr.
Yeah, Otto Porter. I mean, these guys are just, I don't want to say they're cast-offs, but some of these guys were high picks, like Otto Porter and Wiggins, that did not work. And they come into Golden State, and they're not only playing, they are making key plays and producing big minutes and doing all the things. They have championship DNA. And I have always said this. Listen, we don't like Golden State. We obviously have done everything we went for 4 years, but part of the reason why we don't like them is because we respect what they do in a way, because they are so talented, they are so dominant, and you have to give them their props for what they've done.
I respect Golden State. I respect Steph Curry. I respect Draymond. I respect Klay Thompson. I do not respect Kevin Durant. And I respect him as a player. I like him as a player. I like him as a human being. I didn't think that him going to Golden State was the right move. And, for him, only he can make that decision. I'm never going to tell, someone, what they should or shouldn't do, because that's not but it feels like those championships were cheapened. Like, it just feels like that was, at that point, it's like, well, what's the point of even playing this season?
It does, but I think now this year, everybody, I feel like, kind of forgot about them, right? And we talked about this very early on in the season. Now I feel like they are out to prove that, like, hey, because people are saying the first championship, remember, was tainted because Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving were hurt. And so now I think this year it's like, if they beat Boston straight up, you guys can't say anything. And not saying that they're going to, because I think that will be a very, very close series. I will say it, I guess. I would pick Golden State probably in that scenario once I dive into the numbers a little bit, I guess. But credit to these NBA players, and let's hope we get some better games in the finals. We wrap it up for today.
Yeah, well, Brandon, another good show. Cavs are back, trying to get that chemistry back. They're back working out. A lot of people are really excited. We got the finals are coming up. We'll know who's going to be in the finals here soon. Great show. Always a blast. Can't wait to do it again next week. But only one thing left to do.
Let them know.